welcome Samy Jarboui, who is a solution architect out in the field. Hi, Samy.
Hello.
And Ruxandra Voicu, who is one of our machine learning engineers. Hi, Ruxandra.
Hi, Chuck and Samy.
And I will not be leaving for this one because this is our first ever panel discussion at a DevBit. And we're going to be doing a panel around events, not events like DevBit, events like your user interactions with your website. And we want to talk a little bit about them because historically, these have been incredibly important for building good recommendations. And honestly, for lots of our AI products. And so before we get into the topic at hand, though, I want to give each of you a little bit of time just to introduce yourselves and kind of explain what you're bringing to this panel. And I'm going to lead with Ruxandra on this one.
Thank you. So hi, everybody. I'm Ruxandra. I've been a machine learning engineer at Algolia for 3 years. I've mainly been working on recommend models, so I know a bit about what's happening in the backstage. And before that, I used to work for an e-commerce website in Romania, so I have the news on both sides.
Awesome. Right on. Samy, why don't you tell what you're bringing in?
Yeah, so hey everyone, I'm Samy. I'm a solution architect here at Algolia for a little more than 2 years. So I'm working on a day-to-day basis with developers of our customers to help them and guide them in building the best possible search experience. And before joining Algolia, I was a developer during multiple years. Before that, building websites and apps, etc.
Right on. And what I love about bringing you two together is we get both sort of the under the hood insides of kind of how our recommendations work and sort of how it feels to actually take those out in the field and have a lived experience of actually implementing them. So I think it's kind of nice to see both sides of it. I want to talk just a little bit briefly before we jump in on what we mean by events, right? And I think like another way to put it would be like user interactions, maybe. Maybe Samy, do you want to start off and kind of see what would you describe events as?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we talk about events, we talk about basically what your end users are doing with the results that we are that we are returning for the different queries. Have they viewed it? Have they clicked on it, or have they converted on it? It's the kind of signal that we need to get to be used in within the different record models, or more generally speaking, all our AI features that are based on the events to be able to work. And we need to get this signal from your website because it's from the website that the interaction is happening. So that's why what we are talking about when we talk about events. It's basically view, click, and conversions that are happening on the website.
Makes sense. And I think probably, for a lot of folks that are building e-commerce sites, content-based sites, this probably sounds very familiar. They're probably collecting a lot of this data already, right, to kind of understand how their sites are working. But I think the important thing to understand is that the context is slightly different when we start thinking about search or layering search into it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Generally speaking, these kind of interactions are already tracked in like platform like Google Analytics or other kind of things. But here, the idea is to send them to Algolia, not only to get some analytics data, it's part of it, but also the other use that we make of events is really to power the multiple features in the product, and that's really kind of the most valuable things that you can get out of events, bringing them to Algolia.
I think that's a good way of putting it. And so with that kind of understanding of events, that there are these click events, all of these, these sort of larger conversion events, things like that, things that people are typing into search boxes, all of that good stuff. Ruxandra, can you maybe give us an example of a feature within recommend that would require events and sort of how that would be consumed and used?
Sure. Most of our models require events. We've only now started looking into eventless models, but we have basically what Lucia presented before, We have alternative recommendations, similar recommendations, more commonly known as related products in FBT, and trending items and facets. And they all work based on conversions and clicks. And yeah, basically what you get is recommendations based on your user's behavior and your catalog.
Makes sense. Yeah. And so it can kind of flavor essentially, the behavior that users are doing with your site can flavor the types of recommendations that we're pushing back up. So
Yes, yes. So what we describe as we describe the user intent as basically the click is before a conversion, but the conversion is that the user is actually buying the product. So it has more value for the models. They learn that they would be more interested in that.
right. And this kind of pattern actually lives outside of recommend as well. There are other places where we can kind of use that data. If you've used one of our features like dynamic re-ranking or AI re-ranking, essentially it's a similar sort of concept of like within the search results themselves, we could even use sort of these signals from the users to sort of decide, oh, that sixth thing seems to get clicked quite often. Maybe we need to boost that up a little bit in the ranking. So I think this is a pattern that you'll see sort of over and over throughout the site. And it's a real way to sort of essentially turn the search experience into something a little bit more dynamic, interactive. I don't know the word to use, like more of a conversation maybe with the customers. And I think the other interesting thing that kind of came up earlier was personalization, right? Which is not the same as recommendation, as things Lucia I think did a great job of defining. But on it, personalization kind of needs this type of data, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We need from the customer need to send events to power personalization because we need to know on which product and kind of product the user has clicked or converted to be able to power the feature relying on that and to be able to give to personalize the result or give personalized recommendations based on these signals that are very important. To give the data for the feature to work.
Right. And we're going to talk a little bit later about sort of different ways to get those events in. But one way to do it is we do actually have an API for it called the Insights API that allows you to sort of send those events in. And that allows you to sort of train these models, particularly the ones, like to your point, Ruxandra, that are sort of very require user interaction. We need to know what the user's doing. We need to know that they're putting things in their cart. We need to know that they're clicking on them. But I think the interesting thing is, while historically those were kind of required to use recommendation or use recommend, there are newer models where actually you don't need those events, right? So what would be a case where you might not want to use events or you wouldn't need to use events? I'll put that to Ruxandra.
Okay. So yes, we have related content, which is only based on your catalog. So your product attributes, descriptions, titles, which would also be suited for a media use case. And we have another model based on images, looking similar model, the one that Paul-Louis is gonna present next. So in case you don't have enough events or you don't necessarily have an e-commerce use case. Yeah, sorry, I keep getting distracted because my dog is making noises in the background.
No problem. No problem.
So sorry.
That's okay. That's why we do these things virtually. People are used to it. I think the only sad thing for all of us out here is that we don't get to see the dog because I'm sure it's adorable.
Yes, well, he has a thing for the spotlight. He wouldn't leave after that.
That's fair. But anyway, so to kind of recap, so you were talking about, some of these newer models, and I think what's interesting about them is that they can at least start out essentially doing training themselves based on your records themselves, basically like attributes within the individual records that allow you to sort of build those associations. And spoiler alert, I think we're going to see a lot more of that with Paul Louise talk later about images, and essentially like doing finding recommendations based just on the image of the product or the image of whatever the thing is. So I think there's some interesting things that can be done there as well. But even in those models, there's a level of improvement that it can occur by adding in events. And Samy, and I'd love to kind of get your impressions from the field. Do you have you worked with customers that have started with just sort of the record-based recommendations versus starting with events or starting with a combination of them? What's been your experience kind of out in the field?
Yeah, we have multiple things. We have customers starting without event just based on their record data. But what we always push to have events implemented since day one because it's not only enable some of the other recommend models, but also other features in the search product. So, but it's not a blocker if the customer doesn't have enough time or something to implement them since day one. They can start with this kind of model. That doesn't mean event to work. And there is also another option, which is that they can import some previous events that they may have from their previous provider to be able to already start training these models, the models that need events to work. So it's also another option to already start using recommend even if the events implementation is not done on the website.
Right on. Awesome. We are getting tons of questions. Do you mind if I kind of jump into a few of those while we're kind of in the middle of in between sections here? First one is from Sushut. Sushut asks, I am using Algolia for my search, but I have social media feeds based on e-commerce products. So there's a interactive kind of piece to the site. Sorry, they keep moving on me. I was curious if Algolia recommend could be used for smart social media feeds somehow. So have we seen recommendations used, I guess, to sort of aggregate data? I feel like that's almost more like sentiment analysis.
Yes and no. The fun thing about recommend models is that you can customize them to your needs. So you can define anything as an event. We've had people in the past defining playing a podcast, for instance, as a conversion, adding to your queue of episodes, as clicking on the podcast and stuff like that. You can customize the input and then use the models, see what you get, and also customize the output using rules. We have rules. And the CBF model, the related content model, can also be used on textual inputs, so comments, reviews, and get similar items based on that. So even if we call them events or related products, they can actually work for your use case. Considering that we have the CSV upload, I would encourage the person that asked the question to just try it out and see how it goes.
Right on. Yeah, I think that is an important point, that to us, these are just records. They're just JSON objects with attributes. And there are a lot of different ways that the models can be used to sort of make those associations based on those attributes, regardless of what they represent, whether it's a chew toy for your dog or the latest series on Netflix. So I think that's an important point here. I'm going to keep going through these questions. I can't keep up with them, honestly. They keep scrolling off the page. People have a lot of questions. Frequently bought together. Anything on the roadmap for product category recommendations as opposed to product recommendations? Anything we can talk about there?
Not for now, but we have a lot of features coming up for the frequently bought together model. I would be curious to know the motivation behind the question.
Sure. There's a little bit more to it. It says, my interest is on using this as a fallback when specific product recommendations are not possible due to every product being unique, different SKUs. So, And I think there are some fallbacks built into the recommend front end libraries that allow you to not fall back to a category. I think that's an interesting idea, but at least to fall back to a search, right?
Yes, yes. That is the fallback component that you can use from the FBT model. But you could also use rules for that, or maybe try trends per category.
Yeah. Trends are a great way to do that. Actually, that's a good idea. So the trending models they're tracking across your entire that entire category. So that could be a good way to sort of interact with it. It'd be cool to see that layered into the front end, though. Ooh, I'm giving it a thumbs up. Look at that. But it'd be cool to see that layered into the front end, right? Where you could sort of have a cascade of product recommendations to trends to then a filter. There's an ask for you. You can throw that on the backlog.
Yeah, well, we have a few examples of customers that use some models as fallback to other models.
Oh, that's
So
cool. That's cool. We'll have to see. We'll see if we can get some links to that for later to share out. I think I know the answer to this one. Are customer ratings, thumbs up, thumbs down type ratings on a product factored into personalization? Oh, well, personalization is a little different. But I'm going to try and answer this one, and then you all can keep me honest on it. But I would say clicking on a thumbs up, thumbs down is a click event. And if you represent that appropriately within the events that you're sort of aggregating, that can be used for recommendation. I can't really speak to personalization. Is that more or less accurate?
I think Samy might know better.
Yeah, I was trying to think about that because you can't. The thumbs up can be seen as a kind of conversion because you imagine that you have already clicked on the product or you are it's kind of the same action than adding it to favorite, for example. You can track it as a conversion to have the signal that the user kind of converted on it. So it's an interaction more important than just a click, but because he's saying that he's liking this product, basically. But for the other way, the thumbs down can't really be tracked because we don't have this kind of negative event tracking. So it will not. I will recommend to not send any event if the user clicks on the thumbs down, and to send a conversion if he clicks on the thumbs up. So this way you'll be able to use this signal in the personalization, for example. But yeah, we don't have a way of representing a negative event, I would say.
That's an important thing. These are just boosting events.
Yeah.
We don't really have the concept of a going the other direction.
Yeah.
Okay, but I do think that is interesting, and also maybe a good time to point out that a lot of sort of these event aggregation type products, I'm thinking like the segments of the world, things like that, tend to have sort of very granular definitions of lots of different types of events. And that is starting to kind of bleed into the search side of things too. We're starting to get more granular with our events too. So you have kind of an opportunity to differentiate between like a purchase event and an add to cart event and things like that. So there are lots of ways I think we can map those events, right? Like what does that mean in your world if what you have is just a blog post and a series of comments, right? What is a conversion event in that world? I think that's something that's very important to sort of think about.
Yeah.
Ruxandra, important one for you. What's your dog's name?
He left the room.
So yeah, dogs' names they're good to give, but also sometimes those are like, PII that can answer questions to get people into websites. So maybe we won't talk about the dog's name right now.
His name is Milo. It's not a secret, but he left the room. So
okay. There's a question around, can Algolia help tags sort content according to predefined categories? Query categorization is a thing that we do, but it's sort of outside the scope of recommendations. So maybe we'll save that for another day. But look up query categorization if you want to read more about that. Can be implemented in online game search and deliver the same functionality as an e-commerce site. I would say absolutely, right? Game search is essentially, it is just an e-commerce thing. Like it's just a media product as opposed to a physical product. So I would say you could definitely use recommendations for a game search site, right?
Yeah.
Yes, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And use both the events and the attributes of the games.
Cool. Oh man, they just keep coming. How can events be split for products with variants or attributes? Is there a way to configure the events per SKU, not per product? So
Yeah.
there is some filtering on attributes, right? Can happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I can speak about the way to send event and to structure the data in the context of variants. Basically, the events will be tied to the actual record that have been that the user interacted with. So if you are indexing your data, your products at the variant level, saying for example one record per color of the product or something like that. The event will be tied to the color that has been clicked to the actual variant. But if you are indexing only the top level product, so only one record per product, it will be all the events will go to this product. And in the different recommend models, so I will let Ruxandra tell more maybe about that, but we have the way to manage variant to deduplicate recommendation at least on the recommend part. So yeah, I don't know if you want to say more about that.
I think you covered it. Yes, the customers have the option of whether they want to apply the duplication feature or not. The one that was already existing on the search side, we've added it to all of our products as well.
Cool. Well, I think talking about sort of the shape of the events, that kind of takes us into our next section. So let's talk about sending events. And I think one thing that came up as we were kind of trying to think of things that we could be talking about here, one thing that came up was like best practices, common mistakes, right? So, and I know from both sides, so Samy, you know it from an implementation perspective, and Ruxandra, you know better than anyone, like what events are just going to get tossed out when we're starting to train the models. So can we talk a little bit about that? Can we talk about maybe like record shapes and ways to debug? And I think maybe for this one, I'm going to start with Samy, just kind of like,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. The first thing to look at when you want to send events is how you send events should not be a problem because we provide every different possibility to send events, going from the events that are integrated in our integration if you are using it, that are also implemented in our front-end libraries. We have also a backend API to send events. So you have basically multiple ways to send events, and there is no pro and cons regarding the different ways. You just have to pick up the one that is the most simple for you to implement in your context. So it will be the first thing, and also one of the thing to think about is the user journey on the website, to not miss an opportunity to send events. For example, we usually see a customer not sending event from the autocomplete experience. They send event only from the search result page, which is not a good thing because they are missing some opportunities. So it's important to review all the user journey, all the different possible interaction with the results, to take that as an opportunity to send events. And in terms of validating events that you send, we have the event sub in the dashboard that is which is providing an events debugger and some metrics to see the events that are coming live from your website, to see to spot very quickly if you have errors in your events, etc. So I recommend to always have this tab open when you are working on events to see them coming live and being able to debug quickly if needed. And yeah, speaking of the quality of the events, maybe Ruxandra, you can talk about that because it's important to send us valid events for the features to work.
Yes. Well, As Lucia has mentioned during her presentation, we've had some issues with FBT where customers were setting conversion events and expecting some recommendations and getting recommendations instead of complementary products. They were getting the same type of product recommended because customers, instead of mapping the conversion event just to the purchase event, they were mapping it to add to cart as well or add to wish list. As you've said, Chuck, the event types are more fine-grained for other clients than us. So we've added the events customization feature now, where they can choose exactly the subtype of the event that they want to send to the models.
Right.
And
that's not just filtering on the event type. Does that allow you to also filter on the event name, so that if you've named events differently, you can kind of trigger them, or is it specifically?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. It's only up to what you have named your events.
Right. So if I've got my Pokemon card database site and I say purchase card is my event, then I can filter for those purchase card events as my conversion.
Yes.
Awesome.
And you can expect the recommendations to make more sense to your use case.
Very cool. Very cool. And I remember we were talking a little bit about kind of the difference between trying to debug an event that's the wrong shape versus an event that just has bad data in it, right? And I know that the second can be a little bit more difficult to troubleshoot. So I wanted to drill a little bit more into that, and maybe especially focus on a couple of fields that maybe could be the most troublesome for folks. Not to name names, query IDs and user tokens, but maybe we can kind of address a little bit of that and kind of drill in. I mean, I think first of all, I'd like to talk a little bit about query IDs, because those are unique to the Algolia world, right? Even if you're collecting data for other things, you're probably not collecting query IDs. And for those that don't know, every time someone hits our API and makes some sort of search, that response that comes back, we actually give it a unique ID on the backside. And we can surface that in the front end too. We can actually send that along through Click Analytics. And that means that as a user progresses through your site, we can tie everything back to that search that started that whole journey. And my understanding is that for several of our models, query IDs are important, but maybe not for all of them. And Ruxandra, do you maybe want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes, recommend is not really looking at the query ID. We don't need it for the events that customers send to us. The models don't need that information. It's not related to a search query. It's more on the discovery side of the journey.
So that means if you're getting your data from an external source like Segment or Google Tag Manager, even if you don't have those query IDs, that's still valuable data for recommend.
Yes, of course, it can be used.
Excellent. And just to kind of toot my own horn a little bit there, I did a live coding session actually with the folks at Segment. We did some awesome live integration work where essentially we instrumented a site for Segment and got that data over to the Algolia side as well. So you can check that out on our YouTube channel. It was fun. It was fun to do, and it was cool to kind of see that data come through. The other field that I think trips people up a bit is the user token. I know that's not just us. I think that's probably across the board, but maybe we can talk a little bit about what a user token means to us and what we kind of want to see there.
Yeah, the user token parameter is the one that will allow us to tie an event to a user, basically to be able to know that this user has sent these events. And it's one of the mandatory parameter to be able to send a valid event. And because without it, we will not be able to know to link some events with some users. So we have, speaking of the events part, we have two kind of user token. We have the user token when the user is just a visitor, like an anonymous user. But we added recently the parameter called authenticated user token, which will let you send also the user identifier when the user logs in on connect on the website to be able to keep track of his activity no matter from where he's connecting, while he's connecting to his account, will be able to link this event to this user. So that's the two kind of parameters that we need for the events to be valid, and to be able to link them to the user.
Right on. And I think one important differentiation, right, is user tokens are not the same as session tokens.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. It's the user token when it comes to a visitor, to an anonymous user token. What we recommend usually is to store or to use a random value that you store in a cookie, for example, that will live in the user's browser while the cookie exists, to be able to keep track of his activity and to link these events to the user. The thing is to avoid to have too short sessions because in this case we'll not be able to have a consistent user activity linked to the user. So yeah, that's the thing.
Okay, good to know. Good to know. I want to get into, now that we're kind of talking about the events themselves, I like, Samy, you brought up the debugger. And one thing that I really like about the debugger is it'll show you kind of what we received, what was good about it, what might not have been good about it. But the other interesting thing is it'll also tell you, like, and this is how you can use it, right? Based on the data that you sent through, it can train these models, which I think is very interesting. And I want to spend, I think we've got a few minutes left. I wanted to just kind of maybe talk a little bit about what happens to that data once it gets into Algolia and once the models start using it. And Ruxandra, I was wondering if maybe you could just kind of, in broad strokes, maybe talk about that process, maybe pick one of your models that, relies on events, and talk about what we do with it once the events are on the backside and we're getting ready to actually train the model.
Yes, so I will talk about FBT since it was already mentioned quite a few times. FBT only looks at conversions. You can now define the subtype as well. And what we do is we filter out some of the events. We try to clean them up a bit because some of the customers, despite Samy's guidelines, they send us session tokens. And and also some of the customers have a lot of bots. So we also try to filter those out as well and have the cleanest picture possible of the actual user behavior. And then what we do is we train our models on this clean data set. And our models are looking at the big picture of the user behavior and try to recommend products based on your other users' activities. If you want to look more into it, it's collaborative filtering models. And we generate recommendations based on past behavior. And then what you can do is apply rules on top of the recommendations and filter them, fine-tune them to your needs. And yeah, you can use the FBT on your cart page, as Lucia showed. This would be the backstory of the FBT model.
Very cool. Very cool. And then the records, I assume once you've trained the model, they'll kind of drift off on the backside. We don't keep them. It'll be a new set of records. I think, what is it, like a 60 or 90-day window?
Yes. All of our clients' data is deleted after 90 days. Our models are retrained daily. So you get a fresh set of recommendations based on your catalog updates and your user updates. Let's say the season has changed, you have a fashion website, or Black Friday happened and you have a lot of events coming in. Your recommendations are always going to be fresh based on those.
And I think the other issues. I think the other cool thing is that if for some reason the model does fail to train, you can continue using the last train version of the model. which is nice too. So it's not like you're going to lose your recommendations, but it is something that you got to kind of keep track of too, especially if you have like a really spiky, I guess, interaction, you might drop below a threshold for one of your models. So just kind of be aware of that too. Maybe keep an eye on what sort of event data is coming through, I would say.
Yes, of course.
Awesome. We've got a couple minutes. Should we hit a few more questions here?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, here we go from Alex Baldwin, but spelled Alyx. Is there a good way to craft events based on media consumption, read, watch time, amount of content consumed, etc.?
Yeah, in terms of media use case, we have some in our customers. The question will be, so the click event is quite simple, but the conversion event might be a challenge to define. But yeah, you can definitely define take as a conversion the watch time of the article or something. Yeah, it can be something different than the add to cart for non-e-commerce website. So yeah, it's up to you to define what. So the conversion is the most advanced kind of engagement from the end user. So yeah, you can define that at the end of the day as you want, depending on your use case.
Right on. And I think there's a lot of questions here. It's kind of interesting. Everyone's kind of thinking in terms of their individual use cases. I see there was a question with a couple of likes around recommendations for a resource database. I think everyone's just kind of trying to think about like, what do you capture? And I would love it if Samy and Ruxandra, if you can hang on. Well, unfortunately, our panel discussion has to end, but the questions are over in the Q&A tab over on the site. If you want to go over and maybe see if there's anything that you can kind of comment on after the fact, we would love, I'm sure our audience would love to get answers to all of the wonderful questions over there.
Yeah.
And there's even one about where your dog is, Samy, but that's okay. Well, I want to thank you both, Ruxandra and Samy, for joining me. I really enjoy doing a panel discussion, and it isn't just because I get to talk more. I love that we can kind of engage with the user, with our users, and get some really valuable kind of back and forth. So hopefully it was valuable to you as well. Right on. Well, thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you in the chat.